Welcome to Grammar, y'all. Thanks for visiting. If you want some chill and purposeful grammar knowledge, make sure you subscribe. In today's video, we're going to begin our forays into dependent clauses, also called subordinate clauses. Yep, that's right. Two names for the same exact construction. In our videos together, we'll call them dependent clauses. I just didn't want y'all to get confused if you ever heard them called subordinate clauses. So there are three types of dependent clauses: adverbial, adjectival, and nominal. In today's video, we're just going to cover adverbial dependent clauses. They're effective little rhetorical tools, so they seem like a sensible place to start. But before we get to their rhetorical effectiveness, we actually need to know what they are, so we'll begin there. Like adverbs, adverbial dependent clauses can modify verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs, but typically they modify the verb in the independent clause. Now, just so you know, an independent clause is also known as a complete sentence. Two names for the same grammatical structure. Adverbial clauses are pretty easy to recognize for a number of reasons. Number one, they use recognizable subordinating words like although, since, when, because, while. They also contain three things: a subordinate word, a subject, and a verb. The other one is that adverbial dependent clauses can move around a sentence from the beginning of the sentence to the middle of the sentence to the end of the sentence. And where we put that dependent clause will affect how the sentence is read, but we'll get there. Just so you know, a subordinate word is a word that begins subordinate clauses. I have actually seen it defined like that before. I'm sorry, I really don't care for these kinds of definitions because they don't really explain anything to us. Let me see if I can give you a better definition. A subordinate word is a word that tells us the relationship between the information in the dependent clause and the information in the independent clause. Let's look at our list of subordinate words earlier. Although, since, when, because, while. Clearly, you can see how those little subordinate words position what's happening in one clause with what's happening in another. If you're still a little lost, don't worry. We'll circle back around to subordinate words and their importance in other videos. So, like I said earlier, every adverbial clause has three things: a subordinate word, a subject, and a verb. Now, I just want to say that a subordinate word is a subordinate word until it's not. Remember, language does not exist in a vacuum, but words interact with the other words around it. So I just want to give you a little caveat here. What we have named as subordinate words are subordinate words and function as that until they function as a preposition. There's a short list of words that function as both subordinate words and prepositions, and sometimes we need to pull the lens out to read the words around it to figure out which it's functioning as. So let's look at some examples in play for this. The words before and after are functioning differently in these sentences. In numbers 1, they're both functioning as prepositional phrases because before and after is only followed by a noun. And remember, for it to be an adverbial dependent clause, it needs the subordinate word, the subject, and the verb. But here we just have a noun. In number 2, before and after are functioning as subordinate words because we've got the noun, that is, we got the subject, but we also have the verb. Like I said earlier, there are only a handful of these words that shift between prepositional phrases and subordinate words. Words like before and after, as, since, and until. Remember, if one of these slippery words is followed by a noun alone, you have a prepositional phrase. If it's followed by a subject and a verb, Then you have dependent clauses. One of the things we'll talk a lot about on this channel is how language refuses to be put into pretty little boxes with pretty little labels. Back to dependent clauses now. Let's take a moment and look at adverbial dependent clauses in action. Here are a few sentences. Our dependent clauses are bolded here, and yep, we have the three things that every adverbial dependent clause has. We have a subordinate word, we have a subject, and we have a verb. And as adverbial dependent clauses can do, we can move them around in our sentence. Here's how we might do that with our first sentence. Now, I need to note here that all three of these sentences are correct by modern usage rules. However, let's be honest, some of these sentences sound better than others. Well, sounds better is all about rhetorical choices, which we'll get to in other videos. But here, we're going to finish up the definition of adverbial dependent clauses. And what good is a definition video without talking about punctuation, that is, mechanics? Well, if we go back to our dependent clause, moving around the sentence, we can see the rules in play. When an adverbial dependent clause begins the sentence, we separate that clause with a comma. When an adverbial dependent clause is in the middle of a sentence, we put a comma before and after the clause. And when an adverbial dependent clause ends a sentence, we have no comma at all. All right, y'all, let's go over the big ideas again. All adverbial dependent clauses have three things: a subordinate word, a subject, and a verb. Adverbial dependent clauses can move around the sentence, and the punctuation changes depending on whether it's at the beginning, the middle, or the end. Wonderful job today, y'all. Stay tuned for more videos about how we can use adverbial dependent clauses in rhetorically effective ways in our writing. Thanks so much for joining me today. Y'all take care of yourselves. Number one, adverbial dependent clauses always has, nope,